Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this discussion. We will discuss the resurgence of the Islamic State. And with me are my colleagues, Uday and Fatima. And to set the ball rolling on January 4th, the Islamic State declared a new global offensive, and the declaration was made by the group's official spokesperson, Abu al-Ansari. The declaration was publicized after the Islamic State Khorasan province claimed responsibility for the January 3rd terrorist attack in Kerman city in Iraq. Around 94 people died and 284 others were injured. ISIS has claimed over 60 attacks across the world since the attack in Kerman. And just to build a wider context of this discussion, perhaps Uday, you can maybe focus a look at the growth and the activities carried out by the Islamic State Khorasan province, which appears to be the most active at the moment of this Islamic State affiliates around the world. So what really makes the ISKP to appear to be on the offensive lately?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sitati. Thanks. So to go back a little bit, up till about 2020 and 2021, ISKP, the Islamic State Khorasan province. The Khorasan province includes Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, parts of basically Western South Asia. So back in 2020, 2021, ISKP was on the back foot as the Taliban and US military was making some serious gains against it, killed its leaders, and fractured the group. After the Taliban's takeover in 2021, though, or was it 2022, the ISKP seems to be in a resurgent mode. It started off by first consolidating operations in Afghanistan, where it's carried out multiple attacks, from suicide bombings to IEDs to shootings. And from there, when there was some pressure from Afghanistan and the Taliban on them, they expanded back again into Pakistan. And in Pakistan, they're a threat at the moment, and they've threatened the upcoming elections in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So from this, we can see since the Taliban's takeover in Afghanistan, the ISKP has gotten a chance to regroup. And it's important to mention Afghanistan in this context because the Taliban says that, there's no armed groups working in its country except for them. But that is clearly not true. ISKP has taken advantage of the security environment in Afghanistan. They brought in fighters from Tajikistan, for example. I believe the Iranian Kerman attackers were from Tajikistan. So there's a lot of movement of militants in Central and South Asia going towards ISKP's training camps, and they're capitalizing on the propaganda that the Pakistani government is it's against the Islamic State. The Taliban also is against an Islamic State, even though the Taliban is an Islamic emirate. So they've been capitalizing on this propaganda and basically digging in their roots deeper. And that has allowed them to resurge as a regional movement, which is, as you said, Sitati, one of the fastest growing movements of the Islamic State in the world, maybe except for the Islamic State West Africa province. Could you tell us a bit about that and the security situation in parts of West Africa where ISKP has territory? But before sorry, Fatima, could you just tell us some of the attacks that not ISKP, but other IS affiliates have claimed since the Kerman attacks?
Right, thanks, Uday. So I think it's important to highlight here that ISKP is not the only Islamic State affiliate that has carried out attack this month. around 14 Syrian soldiers were killed by suspected Islamic State militants near Palmyra town in Syria on January 9. Then, in another attack, 3 Iraqi soldiers were killed in clashes with Islamic State militants near Haditha town in Saladin province of Iraq on January 14. Additionally, 3 suspected members of Islamic States were arrested in Istanbul, Turkey on January 3rd.
Right.
And what you mentioned about
Yeah.
Afghanistan is absolutely correct. The group has been utilizing the weak governance in Taliban and using it to revive itself in the region. Now, maybe Sitati can further highlight group's operations in EMEA region and elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, just to take it back a little bit, Uday, something really important that as much as it is the fastest growing of these affiliates, we also have to take into consideration that the Islamic State affiliates in Africa, especially in West Africa, are still active and could also be considered, I mean, to be some of the most high-profile Islamic State affiliates globally. And just to take you through, I mean, some of these highlights over the last few days or weeks. In Mozambique, for instance, on the 3rd of January, I mean, 3 civilians were killed by suspected Islamic State Mozambique province militants in Cabo Delgado province. So the province is still remains a hotspot to, the threat of terrorism, despite sustained military operations by different armed forces, including the Mozambican forces and other regional and, armed forces as well. Further across on the western side in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Allied Democratic Forces, which is affiliated with the Islamic State, still remains active in Ituri province, in North Kivu province, and parts of South Kivu as well. And on the 14th of January, 9 civilians were killed by the Allied Democratic Forces in Ituri province. And then the most prominent of all, that is the Islamic State in West Africa province, I mean, still remains active in Nigeria and around the Lake Chad region. It has carried out several attacks this month. And ISWAP, as it is commonly known, is also engaged in territorial fights with Boko Haram. And these clashes have taken place, I mean, several times this month. And then in the entire Sahel region, the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara remains active in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. So these are 3 countries in the Sahel region which are mostly affected by the threat of terrorism. And the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara and JNIM, the Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin militant groups are expanding their territories in these countries. And as we shall see later on in this discussion, these groups, I mean, present risks for businesses. As maybe Uday, you may want to chime in on this in terms of the implications for businesses. What businesses could consider watching out for going forward in the face of these risks?
Great. Sitati, so to answer that question, it's essentially that, businesses should not get complacent, even though ISIS is a lot weaker than it was when it had Raqqa and Mosul and when it declared a caliphate. It still is an asymmetric threat. In some places, the threat is from an insurgent group, in other places is more from lone wolf and sympathizers. So just looking at places which are of concern at the moment, starting from Asia, we have the southern Philippines, where the Islamic State East Asia claimed, or ISIS, they claimed a very large bombing in Marawi. Was highly significant. Over 50 people were injured. And this is one of the largest bomb attacks over the last year by this affiliate of ISIS. So right now, as the Philippines peace deal continues to, well, there's continues to be a lack of progress in it. This could open up the window for potentially more sympathies for ISIS and more recruitment and operational capabilities for them. So the southern Philippines is a place to watch. Another place to watch is in Indonesia. ISIS have been uncovered to be plotting against the February 14th elections, the general elections in Indonesia. And these groups have a history of targeting or attempting plots during election periods. And their ideology basically says that, basically implies that, there is a heightened terrorism risk in Indonesia over the coming month. In India, although security forces have cracked down quite a lot on terrorism, there is still the proliferation or the networks of small localized ISIS affiliated, not directly affiliated, but sympathizers and cells. Some of them which plot to carry attacks out in India, some of which tried to go to Afghanistan to join the ISKP. Moving over to Pakistan. Now, this is where ISKP is a significant threat, especially in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It has said that it will conduct attacks during the election. The Pakistani general elections are also supposed to be held in February. And ISKP does have the capability to launch large attacks in Pakistan. It has done suicide bombings in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in recent months. There's also been a lot of Pakistani security forces intelligence saying that there is a threat of suicide attackers, there is a threat of attacks, and this comes from ISKP and the Pakistani Taliban. It's interesting to note here that a lot of ISKP's members come from disenfranchised members of the Pakistani Taliban and the Afghan Taliban who didn't agree to a peace deal with the US, for example. Of course, ISKP is a threat to Iran also and Afghanistan. They routinely attack Shias in Afghanistan and they attack the Taliban government too. Iran has always been at a threat from ISIS, and the Kerman attacks did show that they do have some significant capabilities there, and they will look to try to repeat these attacks. I believe there were some plots foiled also.
Yeah.
Moving over to Europe and the Middle East and Africa, it's more, the threat is, well, not Africa, but Europe at least. The threat is more from sympathizers and kind of lone wolf attackers who aren't necessarily lone wolf because they do have connections to ISIS.
Yeah.
But, there has been concerns with refugees coming over and just the influx of people into Europe that has led to multiple terror being foiled over the Christmas period in countries like France and Germany, for example.
Yep.
And Sitati, as you said, like in parts of West Africa, actually, IS to control West Africa province, they control a wide area, and as insecurity grows in the region, we can see them basically increasing in size and strength because there's no concentrated effort against the West Africa province.
Yep.
So to come back to what businesses have to think about is that the threat is still persistent. The threat is lower, but it's still underlying, and this is not a point where you get complacent. And at the end of the day, businesses have to be flexible in navigating different environments that could rapidly change, especially with regard to terrorism. So I guess to close up from my end, the Islamic State remains a threat across the world. it is a lower threat, but it still is a persistent threat, and localized conditions and conflict make local affiliates stronger at some point if dice fall.
Yeah, so I think you have given a very good elaboration, I mean, of the risks that businesses could face in view of the resurgence of the Islamic State. But I also think it's extremely important for them to not hesitate reaching out to APAC assistance for comprehensive risk assessments that would aid I mean, in the operations in these environments across the Asia Pacific and across Europe, Middle East, and Africa as well. Unless Fatima has something else, I think that marks the end of our discussion for today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sitati. That's it from my end, but thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot for joining us, everyone. We'll see you later this week on another interesting topic. Thanks.